Hey everyone, this is Frank Quinn from Heritage, Ohio. So glad that you are joining us today. It's May, that means it's Preservation Month, and we wanted to bring you a special webinar, a special rehabilitation story. As you can see on your screen, we're going to be talking today about the restoration of the McDowell-Phillips house in Medina. And our presenters today are Brian Farron, president of the Medina County Historical Society, and Matt Wiederhold, the executive director of Main Street Medina. Brian was born and raised in Medina County, and he graduated from the Ohio State University with a degree in business administration. He retired in 2020, which must be nice, after working in senior management in customer relations, inside sales, and technical support in the steel, toy, plumbing, and lighting industries. Active in many community organizations, Brian joined the Medina County Historical Society Board in 1999 and has served several terms as its president. Key projects he has worked on recently include a $150,000 capital campaign in 2016 to make improvements to the John Smart House, an 1886 Queen Anne Victorian owned by the Historical Society and used as one of their house museums. And in 2018, Brian secured a state capital grant for a new driveway and parking area to help purchase archive digitization equipment, to help with exterior lighting and also air conditioning for the Smart House. Brian's retirement turned into his biggest project to date, which is the successful $500,000 capital campaign to purchase and preserve another local landmark, the McDowell-Phillips house, which will be the focus of our webinar today. Brian oversaw the contractor work on the exterior and interior repairs, as well as the volunteers who worked to preserve and transform that 6,000 square foot treasure into a second museum. Brian and his wife Carol have both devoted thousands of hours to the Historical Society. So welcome Brian and welcome Matt. Matt has been, you are welcome, has been involved in community development and revitalization for 20 years. Many of those years I've had the privilege of watching him in his work. And Matt's a graduate of the National Main Street Institute. Matt currently serves as the original and current executive director of Main Street Medina in Medina, Ohio. Matt's a 1992 graduate of the University of Toledo with a degree in art history, focused on American art and architecture from 1860 to 1930. His passions for history, design, and revitalization run deep. He has also served as one of the first Ohio Urban Program Main Street directors in Toledo, Ohio, and as the project manager and economic development director for the Gordon Square Arts District in Cleveland. Matt's hobbies include gardening, thrifting, and going to flea markets, collecting American pottery, and studying old buildings and local history. He is currently restoring his ninth, no, that can't be. Really, Matt? Ninth?
Yeah.
Matt is on his 9th historic home restoration with his husband Joshua at his side, helping to redo the floors and recondition the windows and paint and all that great stuff that us lovers of old houses are always involved in. So great to have Brian and Matt with us today, and this is going to be a real treat. Couple quick announcements that I'd like to make. Have you voted for our Preservation Month photo contest yet? We have our photo contest up on our website. If you go to Heritage Ohio, you'll see a photo contest blog post across the top of our screen. Click on it, check out our entries this year, and vote for your favorite. There are some really cool photos on there this year. As far as our presentation, we'll have question and answer at the end of it. Feel free to type a question into the question box and we'll do our best to answer it. I guess that's about it. However, if you have problems with your webinar over the course of the presentation, you can try logging out and logging back in. It's kind of like that commercial where that kid says, turn it off and turn it back on, and that'll fix it. And a lot of times that actually does help it. So, okay, without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Brian and Matt. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Brian Farron, and it's my pleasure to share with you the ongoing story of this restoration of the McDowell-Phillips house, an 18-month, $500,000 project completed during a global pandemic.
Well, geez, I hit the button and a thing popped up. That's not good. Okay. The McDowell-Phillips house is one of Medina, Ohio's outstanding architectural treasures. It was designed by local-born architect George Nettleton, and it was built between 1890 and 1892. The home was constructed by the Gruningen brothers of Medina, who built the majority of notable homes within the city. The house is well over 6,000 square feet and cost $10,000 to build. The house was divided into 4 apartments after World War II and would stay that way until great-great-grandson Drew Phillips would convert the house back to a single-family residence in the 1990s.
The house was built for R.M. McDowell, a celebrated and decorated Civil War veteran and president of the Phoenix Bank, and his wife Elizabeth Blake McDowell, the daughter of H.G. Blake, who served as a state representative, a U.S. congressman, and was a staunch abolitionist whose home was a stop on the Underground Railroad.
The McDowells had 5 children. The last to live in the house was Bessie, whose daughter Florence married O.B. Phillips, which is how the Phillips name became part of the legacy. And as we go through this, Brian and I will do our best to keep the names straight. There's a lot of names and a lot of people associated with the history of this house. The McDowell-Phillips house on the lower right corner of your screen is a marked transition from the traditional Queen Anne homes we mostly think about when we say a Victorian home. And that gray home is the other property that the Medina County Historical Society owns, the John Smart House. The property has been noted as one of the finest shingle-style homes in Ohio and features quintessential shingle-style architectural elements. Okay, there is a delay. There we go. Such as cedar shake shingle skin with undulating patterns, intricate and geometric window shapes, turrets and combinations of wood and stone or granite details. Overall, shingle-style architecture is dependent on shape and silhouette and not so much on applied ornament or detail. I got to share with you, I'm fascinated with the architect of this house for a couple reasons. He was born in Medina, Ohio in 1860. He went to Cornell to get his degree in architecture and moved to Detroit sometime in the late 1890s. He unfortunately passed away at the age of 40 in Detroit in 1900. Prior to his passing, he joined forces with Albert Kahn, who today is one of the most notable architects of the early 20th century. So it's my thought that if Nettleton hadn't passed away at such a young age, he too may have achieved the notability that Albert Kahn did with all of his major designs for the automotive industry. He also designed some of the most famous homes in Brush Park, which today is undergoing a major revival thanks to attention given by Nicole Curtis on her HGTV show.
The Historical Society was thrilled to have found the original site plan for the house hidden in a cubbyhole in the parlor mantel. It's interesting to note that the house site was shifted south when it was built to now sit over the well that's noted in the drawing. It's in about the mid part of that screen where the arrow is, and subsequently found in the basement. To give you a little background, our society was founded in 1922 to preserve Medina County history. So we're coming up on our 100th birthday next year. As Matt indicated, we also own and operate the John Smart House, a historic property in the city of Medina, as a house and history museum. The Phillips family had previously donated a historic sleigh and carriage to the Historical Society to be restored. And we did so, and now have those two items in our collection that look fantastic. We were not prepared for or even planning to purchase the property. It came as a surprise proposal. The Phillips family approached the society to purchase a home and preserve it after the owner, Drew Phillips, was diagnosed with some illnesses and no longer able to take care of the house. So the purchase agreement really started in early 2019 with an intent to purchase. A letter we wrote to the owners, provided we could raise the funds. So a private capital campaign with some community leaders started in May of 2019 to raise $500,000. The public campaign came to a conclusion in 2019 when we reached most of the pledges by that time. So the whole project was really completed in about 14 months during a pandemic, thanks to committed contractors, key community stakeholders, and volunteers. Funds were secured by public and private donations, corporate and foundation, state of Ohio funding, and lots of in-kind donations.
The Blake and McDowell families essentially didn't throw anything away, and the house became a depository of local, regional, and national history, as well as family history, covering over 180 years in paperwork, furniture, textiles, and so much more. This is a shot of the attic, and honestly, this is after part of it had been cleaned up. Those of you who know me know that I love old things and exploring old buildings, but even I was overwhelmed the first time I walked up into the attic with the literal piles of history that are up there.
Throughout our initial assessment and walk around, things looked pretty good from the street, but ultimately as we got into the project, about 75 to 80% of the shingles on the exterior had to be replaced, and finding the right tradespersons was the key to the success. As far as the interior condition, we had attempts at restoration, modern attempts at restoration had to be reversed, and we had to sort through 180 years of family history, papers, furniture, and while updating and repairing the systems in the house as needed. As Matt said, there was a great deal that came with the purchase of the house that we had to sort through.
One of the cool things is that the original blueprints are with the house, so the Historical Society was able to use those to help guide that exterior restoration. As Brian said, the exterior of the home was in much worse shape than originally thought, and eventually would include the replacement of 75 to 80% of the shingles, many of which had to be hand cut and trimmed to fit.
Overall, the main roof of the house was slate and in good condition. The front and back porch roofs were replaced with dimensional shingles that we had donated by our local Owens Corning roofing plant. As noted with the black felt paper, by removing the damaged shingles, it made it possible to install water-resistant undercoating to protect the structure in the future. That's not our contractor falling off the roof. He was just kicking something.
During shingle repairs, it was discovered that the main beam over the airing porch on the second floor was cracked, and that had to be replaced as well.
Because this house is so visible and iconic in Medina, we received many messages and calls of concern when the gray primer was put on the house, or those gray primed shingles were put on the house. People were concerned that we were changing the iconic red and green color scheme, which obviously proved to be wrong, but many concerns were raised. The lighthouse window in the attic space features over 100 individual panes of glass, 70 of which had to be replaced during repair and all individually glazed into place. That took quite a while and very time-consuming effort. Up on the gables, you can see some of the underlayment boards and the start of a shingle course that we worked with. And once the shingles were applied, we worked with Cleveland-based Sherwin-Williams on the paint supplies and used their historic paint palette for color choices. And here's the site of the new paint being applied. It's a good detail of how many of the replacement shingles were actually applied. Every upside down triangle tooth cut on the lowest row of shingles was hand cut to replicate the original design. That was a very tedious, and the carpenters used a nice template, but they still, one mistake and that would have been a big problem to undo the bottom course and fix. They really were very careful. One of the interesting features of this house was the gutter system. And during some of the porch renovation, it was discovered the house included unusual double level gutters, actually a gutter within the gutter that is tapered. And so the gutter appears to hang very straight on the house, but yet has a tapered slope to it, so the water drains properly. Very complex. None of us had ever seen anything like it. The painters and contractors were very good at respecting the house and the history. Many of the contractors not only extended discounts or did extra work above and beyond, but they also threw in additional supplies and materials, surpassing the initial agreement. As you can note on the right-hand side, the granite foundation of the turret was originally planned to be clapboard siding according to the blueprints, but eventually must have made a decision to make it the granite instead. Those stones all were repointed during the restoration to seal out any water penetration and appear to be now in very good shape.
One of the areas of concern was a cracked sandstone lintel at the base of the tower in the first floor. Rather than trying to remove and replace it, a local welding company created a steel frame which was put into place and pushed the lintel back up into position. So you can see the crack, and that's now pretty straight, and that's been filled in. And then that steel frame was just painted so that it matched the window frame, essentially hiding the repair. So we're going to do a quick before and after. We're going to look at some more outside. One thing I want to point out, so this is before, this is 2019 when the Historical Society bought the property, and this is the after. One thing that fascinates me about shingle architecture, if you think of traditional Victorian Queen Anne homes, essentially it's a composite of rectangular shapes onto which ornament is applied, like those fancy brackets and eaves trims that we love. What fascinates me about shingle style architecture is all the curves, all the geometry in this, and the design is not based on ornament, but it's based on shadow. And to think how this is done without power tools. Today I am lost without my Sawzall and my screw gun, but this is all done by hand, by geometry. We're going to start looking at the exterior restoration with the south facade. This is the front here, and then the drive goes along the side. The south-facing facade had some of the worst weather damage. An original detail of a half-round shingle fan was discovered when shingles were taken down and replaced or replicated based on the ghost lines that were found under the old shingles and upon evidence from the original blueprints. And this is the full south facade restored to its original look. This is the element that was added back in, which is kind of replicated on the north side that we'll see in a minute. The porte cochere is also original to the home, and that was restored as well. Also, a cool thing to note in addition to the color scheme is that the windows are painted a traditional black, which gives it a very elegant and refined look. So on the north facade, this is one of the main public facades that people would see as they would come down the street. And it's one of the most ornamented for a shingle house. But what's interesting is that the ornament is very simple, with simple kind of Doric-based columns, wooden support brackets under this bump out, and the carved arch in the third floor gable, mimicking that from the south facade. The rear of the house has seen quite a bit of change, and especially take a look at this part down here, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that.
The west facade also needed a great deal of repair, particularly due to water damage over the years, and that bump out bay window had leaked on the inside as well. The rear porches and the entry from the porte cochere were rebuilt and a slip-resistant coating was put on the decking to make it safer for museum guests. One thing that fascinated us, there was a pretty serious fire in the house we found in 1903, which started in the original kitchen porch and traveled up the rear wall into the front of the house through the attic. Surprisingly, there was little damage and the house survived with minor modifications, but still much evidence of the charred wood. And how the fire department got it out in 4 hours is just truly amazing in 1903.
This lattice covered area was originally an open porch, which is where the fire started. During reconstruction, the current kitchen was expanded and the porch space enclosed as part of the main house. Medina County Historical Society rebuilt the entry stairs to be safe and with the capacity to support a lift for future ADA accessibility. This is another detail of the condition of the exterior home and then how it looks today. So this is the area where they could put a lift to get people up to the level of the house. And this is all reinforced so that it would support that construction and weight of that. The completed rear and south facades, which really comprised the major of repair and replacement on the entire house. You see how much cleaner and crisper and everything looks now.
The small barn on the property was actually called a wagon shed on the original layout. Needed serious attention to be stabilized for reuse as museum display space and to safely house the McDowell sleigh and carriage. Ultimately, the front facade was recreated and new carriage doors were added. The interior walls were covered with a beadboard, which is a much higher end finish than a regular barn. This barn was also a depository of family furniture and history, including a desk drawer that contained an original personalized invitation to H.G. Blake to attend Abraham Lincoln's inaugural ball, which was also called the Union Ball, in 1861.
So by the numbers, as Brian said, the society raised $500,000 in under a year during a pandemic, which is pretty extraordinary. This gives you kind of a breakdown of where the money went. Brian, is there anything on this list that you want to highlight?
Well, there was a great deal of in-kind donations. As I mentioned earlier, some of the contractors reduced their hourly rate because they want to be a part of the project and were taking great pride in the work. All the suppliers, even like people renting the lift, we asked for an extension of 2 weeks at no cost, and they agreed to do it. And it's just things like that. When people saw the work being done and the visible changes, I had people stop by the house every day just to ask questions or comment or offer their thanks, and occasionally offer their donations to help with the cause.
So the interior restoration has also been a major transformation for the house. The house has been in the McDowell-Phillips family since it was built in 1892. What's really fascinating about the history are the layers and layers that are being archived and curated daily. And I often joke with Joanne King and Tom Hilberg and Brian and some of the other volunteers that this is a rest of your life project, just going through everything that's been found in the house. One of the neatest finds was a letter between McDowell and a stained glass company in Cleveland going back and forth on the design for 2 major stained glass windows for the home, along with these original watercolor renderings of what was proposed. Ultimately, neither of the original proposed designs were constructed, but 2 stunning windows were created and installed. Interestingly, this shell and ribbon motif repeats throughout the house, including in a stencil in the entry hall.
The main parlor didn't require a great deal of repair, but there were numerous layers of wallpaper to remove. After much discussion, we installed a reproduction William Morris print from the period. This room also features 2 burgundy love seats and a side chair original to the house. The small cupboard door on the right of the fireplace mantel is where we found the original site plan and stained glass renderings.
The dining room also didn't need too much repair, so the focus was on restoring the woodwork and again installing period appropriate wallpaper.
One of our board members and Vice President volunteer Farrell McHugh spent hundreds of hours restoring the shellac finish on the woodwork throughout the house, including this outstanding mantle in the dining room. The mantle features brilliant blue tile and the word Save carved into the top, meaning to be well. Between the kitchen and dining room is a butler pantry, and another volunteer board member, Beth Gurman, restored those cupboards, spending numerous hours removing the damaged finish and applying several new coats of shellac.
Originally a small office or a den, this corner room features a tiger oak maple with medieval-inspired hinges. This down here on the floor is a bookshelf that was found in pieces in the attic and was restored and reinstated in the room. The wallpaper is another reproduction 1890s pattern that would be appropriate for the home.
It's another photograph of the many spots in the plaster ceilings that needed repair. The buttons you see there are meant to reinforce into the lath work. As we moved upstairs, the second floor turret bedroom, it's also called the master room, required some plaster repair and reproduction wallpaper. This room features a bed and dresser original to RM and Elizabeth McDowell.
And that sounds like we're repeating ourselves, but literally when we say that the house is full of history, the attic, the barn lofts, rooms, every time you opened a door, a box or trunk, parts of the family were literally falling out. Well, not parts of the family literally, but pieces from the family were literally falling out on you.
And some of the work that took place in non-public places, such as the basement, there were over 7 fuse boxes on one wall that came from days when it was an apartment building, and just as wiring was added over the years, our electrician worked very diligently to work that down to 2 breaker boxes that give us plenty of electrical service to the house. The basement was quite a challenge. In many of the rooms, they were filled with debris, but one in particular was the turret portion of the basement, and it had all kinds of artifacts, which when removed, revealed the well that was included in the original site plan. The well is a stacked stone composite, and it still holds water. The metal pole laying across that case was a siphon pump used to pump the water out of the well. We think this room will become very interesting for events, perhaps even a speakeasy for private parties eventually. Fascinating discovery, though.
I will also share it's very cool to look down into the well, but also kind of creepy because you just have that image that something is going to come up out of the well and get you. But thankfully, Brian covered it up. So the interior work so far by the numbers, Brian, anything you want to call out on this?
Well, it's a combination of the things you see and the things you don't see. Probably the longest running contractor work inside was plaster repair. They spent about 3 weeks here, and they really were old school plaster repair, and they did a wonderful job restoring the ceilings and the wall spaces where plaster had failed. Ultimately, wallpaper failed. So until we got the fundamentals correct, we didn't want to proceed with just papering and painting, and that took a little bit more time. The house did not have air conditioning prior to us purchasing it, and it has a hot water radiator system. So we had a generous benefactor supply the funds to install a very discreet air conditioning system. It runs through small tubes discreetly hidden in the attic and basement, and the ports and rooms are about 2 inches diameter. So you don't even see it, but you certainly feel the effects of lower humidity and cooler temperatures. So overall, very good quality work by the contractors, but more importantly, our volunteer hours, as you see, 7,000 plus. And if you just use an average of $28 an hour, which is kind of the normal range provided, that equates almost, well over $200,000, and that's probably a low number. But we just had people showing up to do whatever was needed when needed, and we were just so grateful for the response.
So this is an historic photo of the home. We're not sure exactly when this was taken. We're thinking the early 1900s, but it's pretty cool that it shows foundation plantings and what the house looked like when the family lived there. And then following the year-long project, this is what the house looks like today.
Well, while we have a few minor painting details to take care of yet, we are very excited, and hope you enjoyed a few minutes to allow us to share our pandemic preservation project with you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, or Matt can answer any questions at this time if you'd like.
That is great. And all I can say is, wow, what a transformation. This is amazing. I was excited to come back and take a look at it, but now I'm even more excited. I cannot wait to get back inside and outside and just check out how this has changed top to bottom.
This truly is probably Medina's most iconic home that most people recognize and love. We also did a short docu-series with our local cable company, Armstrong. About every other week, Brian and I would walk through the house with a cameraman and film progress. So if you're interested in learning more or seeing more about it, if you go to mainstreetmedina.com and look on the other tab, it'll link you to all the YouTube videos. Or if you just go to YouTube and type in McDowell-Phillips house, the series will come up. We've done 10 so far. The 11th series is coming up very soon. Then we're going to do one more episode kind of closing it out. But this has been an amazing partnership for Main Street Medina and the Historical Society to do together. It's been a lot of fun. I kind of joked with Brian the first day of filming that when he got the keys, it was like the kid in the candy store getting his best toy train on Christmas morning. I know I'm thankful that Brian chose to retire so that he could take and lead this project on. But we'd love any questions or comments.
Sure. So it's cool. It's kind of like this old house, the Medina version.
Yeah.
So we do have some questions coming in. Mark asks, is there a fire and burglar alarm system to protect the building?
Yes, there is. It covers smoke, heat, and access points. And a local provider, that was also one of our in-kind donations, but it's a very secure system, same one we have at the John Smart House Museum, and it's proved to be quite reliable with the house. And the fire department's been fully briefed on the house and have done some walkthroughs, and that's always helpful that they know the facility.
Mm-hmm. Jessica asks, is the home officially open for tours?
Almost. We're in the process. We had an event to thank our donors, and we have another one planned to do so. Then our membership will get a chance to see it first. But we hope by mid-July it will be open for tours.
Mid-July. Okay. Mark your calendars. Janet's curious the name of the stained glass studio in Cleveland.
I believe it was the Cleveland Glass Works. Matt might still have that receipt up a few slides back. I do know it was out of Cleveland.
Yeah, what's interesting, I was able to, there's a Cleveland history page, so I was able to actually find an image of the building where the studio was located and where it was made. Sorry if you're getting dizzy for me going through this. I realized I went too far anyway. We're getting there, we're getting there.
There's still there's at least a couple longtime stained glass studios in Cleveland now.
Yeah, H.W. Lewis and Company.
Okay.
I thought the other, maybe the other was the leaded windows, but there is a whole box of receipts saved from the McDowells for just the boiler system, heating system, the windows. And as Matt indicated, there was quite a bit of correspondence back and forth between them. And even Mrs. McDowell weighed in on some of her thoughts.
Cool. We have a question, and I on that stained glass window, I see it up on the screen. I just love how it's from a light yellowish, just a little hint of blue on the left end of the top panel to the right end of the top panel, a deeper blue, just a change in color. It's mesmerizing. Yeah.
What's interesting about this, the fire in 1903 started at the back of the house and traveled over the north side to the front, to the attic. And we think that there was some damage to the window. So these pieces here and here and here that aren't the ripple glass, we believe those were repaired after the fire.
Ah, okay.
But there is still kind of that transition of this brilliant blue into the ambers. And then again, this ribbon motif and the shell are repeated throughout the house.
We've got a quick question here, and then I actually have a knock on my door right now. Were there any architectural district or other governmental regulations to deal with? I'll let you answer that and I'll be right back.
Well, we did apply to receive a historic landmark designation from the city of Medina, and that helps in our zoning application. We had the property rezoned to what we call public facilities classification, which allows basically like churches and or the museum to hold events and things of that nature. But it does qualify to be reviewed by the Architectural Review Committee. Any major alterations we would have done to the house, especially on the front side. We've applied, or we will be applying to the National Register of Historic Homes. That application is in the works. As most of you may be aware, that takes quite a long time to process, but we hope that that process can be completed this summer.
Okay. Question about the Historical Society. How many members is the Historical Society?
We have about 250 member or including that as some families, of course, but around 250, and annual dues pretty much in line with most of the organizations around us. And we also have lifetime members and corporate membership, but we pretty much rely on our membership dues for the operating funds.
Connie asks about the books in the attic, wondering if they will be on display or will they be in the library at the John Smart House?
Well, most of the books found here at the McDowell House will be on display in the bookcases here. We have quite a few yet to go through. We have found many that belong to H.G. Blake, many that belong to R.M. McDowell. The McDowells also ran a bookstore on the square along with their drugstore. So there are copies of books here from many different topics and so on. All need to be cleaned and assessed and determined which ones will be kept or displayed, but we have hundreds to go through yet.
Oh, and Janet, I guess, is giving you all a shout out from Whitney Stained Glass up there in Cleveland. Did you all work with Whitney for part of your building project?
Not directly. They could have, we didn't mention, but 5 years ago, there was an automobile accident that drove into the front porch, and the small stained glass match showed the rectangular one in the turret parlor was damaged, and we understand the previous owner had it repaired, and perhaps that's who did the work.
Okay. Oh, and Janet says she's from Medina.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
But I guess Janet works at Whitney Stained Glass.
That's good to know.
So I'm curious, gosh, so many technical trades that can be involved in this project from top to bottom. I'm curious, just how local were you able to do in sourcing out your artisans and contractors, and are there any in particular you'd like to give a shout out to for the jobs well done?
Absolutely. We were very fortunate. Tom Cavalier was our lead carpenter, fixer, you name it. He actually restored the porch damage on the house when the car had hit it. He also had restored and remodeled the kitchen years ago for the Phillips family. He reached out and connected with two brothers, Alan and Brian Koth of Koth Enterprises. All three were local, within a few miles of here, Chippewa Lake area and so forth. We tried to use local contractors whenever possible. The concrete work out of Valley City, the stone mason was out of Seville, the gutter systems were provided by Miller Spouting down in Wayne County, and local painters, the CertaPro group, actually the office out of Westlake, but they were providing the painting on the exterior. And so whenever possible, we try to keep the money local that was raised local. And we were just able to do that with just about every aspect of the project. Lodi Lumber is a tremendously good source of not only quality lumber, but they have old school cutters and dies that can make a lot of special configured trim and wood pieces if necessary.
Right. Did I miss, who was the plasterer?
Oh, I'm sorry. Plasterer was Carl Hatcher, Hatcher. I believe he was out of Hudson. He'll probably shoot me for calling out because he's been trying to retire for years. He just can't get away from, many large homes. He's very much still a requested contractor. He's very good. He knows his stuff, and he's very careful with old homes, which is one of the criteria we want to make sure. Plastering is not the same as drywalling by any means, and they're a very good team.
Right. So as amazing as the work on the house is, undergoing that successful capital campaign to raise the money that you needed to raise to not only purchase it, but then to restore it. So do you have any pearls of wisdom for folks who are looking at undergoing their own capital campaign?
Well, it certainly starts with a good steering committee of local leaders who are willing to understand the vision of the project and also have the connections, within the local and perhaps the grants as well as foundations in the community. We were very fortunate that several of our local foundations we were reached out to right away. We gave them a presentation at the house. They saw the vision. They really bought into the plan very quickly and were very supportive. We had many individual contributors that just wrote checks that surprised us, but were also, as Matt indicated, this house is so well known in town. People, when they saw it was under threat, they really responded that something had to be done to save this house. And having seen our work at the John Smart House, which is the other Victorian home we own, and how good a shape it is and how we've been good protectors of the property, we take those responsibilities very serious. And being a 100-year-old organization, people knew we were not just another short-term 501c3. We were in it for the long haul. And then lastly, I'd have to shout out to our state representatives, our local representatives, Steve Hambley and Daryl Kick and Senator Larry Obhoff, all helped us secure in the cultural grants in the even number of years, although things got a little hosed up during the pandemic and delayed. And then working with the OFCC has been very good. I don't know if Jessica DeLong's on the program, but she's wonderful to work with. So when you have questions, I reach out to those folks first to start the ball rolling and see what they can do to help secure funding. Our county commissioners also kicked in a little bit of money this year and used their proceeds from their charity ball, a portion of that to help towards the house. So everybody did something. We had donations as low as $5, as great as 30,000 and more.
Wow.
So you just never know till you ask. And I've gotten pretty good at not being afraid to ask for money. It's not my primary talent, but I've learned that it is effective if you just come right out and say, this is what our vision is. You have to tell them what's in it, what the donors will feel will benefit them. And local history, archives, antiques, architecture. Everybody has kind of a sensitivity around why they should donate money, and you have to kind of feel that out with your donor base to understand what motivates them. You just can't say we want to restore this house. That doesn't mean much to a lot of people. But when they started seeing the history, and as Matt said, every day we open up a new box or trunk and there's archives or artifacts in there, people just marvel at how a family could have saved this many letters, photos, and documents, congressional, newspapers from the Civil War era. I mean, you name it, we've found it in this house, and a great deal of it.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is that the house was apartments for 40, almost 50 years, and none of that was ever damaged or taken, so it's all intact. To Brian's point about great public support, definitely that's how the Historical Society raised the money, but that's not to say that there were people that looked at Brian and said, "You're crazy, you can never do this," and they proved him wrong. And those people came back through and they said, you did it, man, and they donated. What we found with a capital campaign, kind of a general rule of thumb, is set your goal and then try and raise about a third of that on the silent end, and then go public saying, we already have this much committed. That kind of gets you over the hump. People are kind of hesitant to be the first one in, but when they see the key players or key funders around town are investing in it, then generally people will invest in it as well. Another way that we kind of promoted this, people said, what are you going to do with it? So, and I think that's something that we've talked. Historical Society is trying to find that balance of, this is now essentially a house museum, but it's also an extension of the Medina County Historical Society Museum. So currently the first floor is kind of set up as a private home museum focusing on the history of the house. The second floor has some family artifacts, but it's also expanded gallery and exhibition space and archive space for the Historical Society. It's also the first time they've had a dedicated office in which to do their work, so they're not sitting at the kitchen counter or putting stuff around the John Smart House. The kind of phase 2 for this, which I think really spoke to some of the donors, this isn't going to be a passive project. Brian, his first dream, I think, was to save and restore this house, but his next dream is building kind of a large barn event center on site. So the house sits on almost 2 acres, and it would be a large barn where they could host parties and events. We have very few public event spaces in Medina, so a place for people to hold smaller wedding receptions or showers or celebrations, and it could be an income generating property as well. So it's not just dependent upon public support or private donations. They'll actually earn money from the project to help sustain it.
Mm-hmm. Great, that's great advice. And happy to report Jessica DeLong is on our webinar, and she has helped a lot of different organizations out all across the state, I know, over the years, just with assisting, navigating how that works with state funding. So it's great to have allies like that to help in the process. Let's see. Oh, so there's the McDowell-Phillips house, but then there's also a whole special place called Uptown Medina, which is ringed around a beautiful open square. I'm wondering, Matt, if you could just take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about, your day job, what you focus on. And what makes Medina such a special place?
Well, my day job is herding cats in the historic district. For you Main Street managers, you understand, trying to get everyone to work together and going in the same direction. But Medina is a really wonderful community, as are many historic towns around the state of Ohio. We were founded in 1818 as the county seat. We're part of the Connecticut Western Reserve, so we're centered around a traditional 2-acre town square. Our courthouse sits right off the square facing Public Square. We were built in 1818. We burned down in 1840. We were built back up and we burned down again in 1870. So currently what you see in Medina is a pretty cohesive collection of commercial buildings built between 1871 and 1881. The town has a very consistent look. Medina didn't change a lot until the 1950s with modernization and big neon signs. And then very quickly, a local group of volunteers got together in the mid-60s and formed the Medina Community Design Committee and started the restoration of our square. So a lot of times, if you're studying preservation, you'll read about Medina because our community was concerned about our look and our history long before many others. Most people didn't really think about American history until the bicentennial of '76. But today we're very thankful and grateful. We're in our 8th year of 100% occupancy in our historic district, our 9-block historic district. We have over 30 different restaurants, pastry shops, and eateries, over 50 shops within town as well. We have a lot of attractions in Medina. We're the home of Root Candle, which started here in the Medina Square. It's an amazing 5th generation American-owned candle company that makes incredible candles just around the corner from the McDowell-Phillips house. We're also the home to high voltage karting, an indoor karting place built within an 1860s foundry building here. And then certainly home to Casa Noel, America's largest indoor Christmas-themed attraction movie memorabilia museum. So there's a lot to see and do in Medina. We have many different museums, local history, the John Smart House, soon the McDowell-Phillips House. And we're getting to a point that we are becoming a day trip or a weekend trip destination, and you're all welcome to come shop, dine, and unwind in Medina.
Cool. Thanks for the invitation.
Sure. And if we ever get back to hosting in-person trainings again, next time Medina hosts, we'll see if we can get Brian to give us a private tour of the McDowell-Phillips house.
That sounds
Absolutely.
great. Well, I don't see any more questions coming across. So unless we get a last minute question, I'd like to thank Brian and Matt for joining us today and sharing this amazing story of one house in Medina, Ohio, a very special house. And just to let everyone on the webinar know, whether you're watching this live and in person, or you're watching the replay of it, that almost all of Heritage Ohio's webinars, past webinars, are available on YouTube. You can just go to youtube.com and search Heritage Ohio. We've been doing webinars for many years now, and there is probably not a topic that we haven't covered in the preservation and revitalization fields. Oh, you know what? I think I forgot. I missed one question from Mary Lewis. Maybe she's about to open her checkbook. She is asking, what are the Historical Society dues?
Our dues, did you say?
Yes.
I believe it's $10 for seniors, 20 for family, 50 for a family or a large organization, and then $300 is our lifetime dues. Our treasurer will probably yell at me for not knowing that right off the top of my head. But
And Brian, if people want to make a donation, where should they send it?
our main office is just at the John Smart House Museum, and that's 206 North Elmwood Street in Medina, and that's 44256. If you have any other information, you can always email us at mchs@zoominternet.net. And we
And
are on
Mary,
as well.
oh, I'm sorry. I was just
And we're
going to
on
say, Mary,
Facebook.
really appreciate that question because organizations like the Historical Society, like Main Street Medina, really depend on the support of their members, stakeholders who derive enjoyment and fulfillment from great downtowns and great house museums. So we would certainly encourage anyone who would like to show their support in that way to write a check.
Absolutely, and you're all invited to Medina on July 10th. We're working with Medina County Historical Society to do a garden tour on the north side of the city, and you can walk around the exterior of the John Smart House and the McDowell-Phillips House, and then see another 11 gardens, I think, ranging from small pocket gardens to large and lush landscaped lawns.
That sounds perfect. I hope we'll all meet up there in July.
Amen.
All right. Thank you again, Matt and Brian. It's been great fun having you all join us for our Preservation Month. Thanks for all of our attendees for joining us today. And I wish you a great rest of your day, great rest of Preservation Month, and we'll see you back soon at another webinar. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you.